Um, I do it from time to time. Sometimes I get my hair cut at a barber. Sometimes I try something new. But today I just felt like cleaning it up, but not putting that much effort into it. So just shaving it in my bathroom. But I wanted to stop and take a moment to share a conversation that I had with ChatGPT. I don't feel weird about the conversation I have with ChatGPT. I don't feel weird that I have conversations with ChatGPT. I use it as the tool that it is. Basically, a way to summarize all of the information that is out in the world on the internet with sources. I feel like ChatGPT accomplishes that task anytime I'm interested in learning more about something. Not necessarily a shortcut to whatever it is I'm trying to achieve. It's usually because I want to understand something better, and I feel ChatGPT, the way I prompt it, provides clarity when I need it. And so lately I've been feeling super introspective, at times existential, and at times philosophical. I did buy the book by Rick Rubin called The Creative Act, and it's already kind of blowing my mind, but in a good way. It's expanding the way I think and the way I perceive, and it's highlighting a lot of things that I'm already doing. So in a way, it's reinforcing how I feel. So that is what the book is doing for me. But I've also discovered a lane of YouTube videos that include some stoicism, a lot of philosophy, a lot of existentialism. But like I mentioned in my last video, my wife saved my life. I was found unresponsive, and she gave me CPR. I ended up spending a week in a coma, so I legitimately lost a week of my life. When I woke up, I had no recollection of what happened, and then being that I was being sedated, a lot of what I was being told wasn't really registering. But needless to say, you can imagine the overwhelming experience that was, not just for me, but for my family, for my now wife. But it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And over the last 5 years, I've been exploring a lot more of my creative side and nurturing that on my own. I could reflect on my childhood and think of times where there was opportunity to nurture my creativity, but for one reason or another, it didn't happen. So I'm taking it upon myself to nurture that creativity. And so all of this leads me to the conversation that I have with ChatGPT. And it goes like this. What is ego death? Ego death is the experience of temporarily losing your sense of separate individual self, the feeling of me as a distinct from everything else. Instead of thinking, I am this person with this story, these thoughts, and these boundaries, that identity dissolves. People often describe it as a loss of identity, a dissolution of personal boundaries, feeling merged with the universe or surroundings, a sense of timelessness, silence or absence of internal narrative. Ego death in this context would mean that this organizing sense temporarily collapses. Oh man, I wish I didn't do it this way. So what I'm trying to do is read a screen record that I did of my conversation with ChatGPT, but the next section says spiritual traditions. Many spiritual paths aim for something similar. In Buddhism, it relates to realizing anatta, no fixed self. In Hindu traditions, it can resemble unity with ultimate reality. That's interesting. Mystics across religions describe loss of self during profound spiritual experiences, feeling like consciousness without a body. Okay. Some scientists sometimes call this ego dissolution. What it feels like. It can be blissful and expansive, deeply peaceful. For some people, it can be terrifying. If someone resists the loss of control, I can imagine how that could be terrifying. The emotional tone depends heavily on mindset, environment, and psychological stability. So when you hear ego death, I think it's common to be concerned. So the next line is it dangerous? It's not inherently harmful, but it can be destabilizing if someone is not prepared. It may worsen symptoms in people with certain mental health conditions. Integration is important, making sense of the experience afterwards. If you'd like, I can also explain the neuroscience behind it, the difference between ego death and dissociation, whether it can happen without drugs, or whether it's considered real or just a brain state. What angle are you most curious about? I feel more blissful about it. That's something I said. And ChatGPT's response, I'm just gonna start saying chat. Chat's response was, that makes sense. When people feel blissful about ego death, it's usually because the experience isn't perceived as losing something. It feels more like dropping a heavy weight, relief from the constant self. Your ego is constantly defending, comparing, planning, judging, replaying the past, worrying about the future. When that quiets down, there's often deep peace, silence, spaciousness, no pressure to be anyone. It can feel like rest at a very deep level. Loss of separation. Many people describe a feeling of unity, not being separate from the world. That can produce love without a target, awe, a sense that everything is okay, a dissolving loneliness. It's similar to descriptions from long-term meditators or mystical experiences. No narrative, just presence. Normally your brain is narrating your life. When the narration drops away, you're just experiencing. That simplicity can feel profoundly beautiful. If what you're feeling is bliss just thinking about it, that's interesting in itself. It suggests you may be craving freedom from pressure, relief from identity tension, or deeper connection. Let me ask something gently. This is chat, preparing me for a question. If what you're feeling is bliss, just thinking about it, is this bliss coming from a past experience you had, curiosity, or longing to escape something? You don't have to share anything personal. I'm just trying to understand what direction this feeling is coming from. So I prompted curiosity, and chat says, that's a very healthy place to be. Curiosity without pressure. When ego death is approached from curiosity rather than escape, it usually reflects something deeper and stable. Curiosity about consciousness, wonder about what self really is, interest in how perception shapes reality, a desire to understand your own mind. That kind of curiosity tends to feel expansive instead of desperate. Here's something interesting. You don't actually have to pursue extreme experiences to explore this. You can gently investigate questions like, where exactly is the self located? Is it in thoughts, in memory, in the body, between thoughts? Who's noticing the thoughts? If you look closely, you may notice the self feels solid, but when examined, it's more like a process than a fixed thing. That realization alone can bring a soft, peaceful feeling. Not dramatic ego death, but a loosening. And importantly, there's no need to force anything. The ego isn't an enemy. It's a useful tool. What people call ego death is usually just temporary quieting of that tool. Curiosity is safe. Forcing intensity is not necessary. And then here's another prompt from chat. It says, if you want, we can explore the neuroscience of why ego dissolution feels blissful, do a small, safe awareness exercise, or talk about how meditation traditions approach this. What direction feels most interesting to you right now? Interesting. So I kind of redirected it a little bit, and I prompted with a question, can you heal your inner child simultaneously? So can you heal your inner child simultaneously while having ego softening? Which I like that phrase better than ego death. So according to chat, yes, and in a healthy way, it actually works better that way. But let's clarify something important. Ego dissolution and inner child healing are related, but they are not the same process. One reduces rigid identity, the other integrates wounded parts of that identity. When done well, they can support each other. So this is more of a response to that question. Can you heal your inner child while experiencing ego softening? How they connect. Ego softening reduces defensiveness. When ego relaxes, you're less busy justifying, blaming, protecting, or avoiding. That makes it safer to feel old emotions that were buried. This is why some people report emotional breakthroughs during deep meditation or psychedelic experiences. They're less guarded. Inner child work requires safety. Healing your inner child means acknowledging unmet needs, feeling old pain without judgment, offering yourself compassion. If the ego is rigid, it may say, "That was stupid. Get over it. It wasn't that bad." If the ego is softened, you can respond instead with, "Of course that hurt. You were small. It makes sense." That shift is healing. The important distinction. Ego dissolution is not equal to emotional healing automatically. Some people have ego death experiences but do not integrate childhood wounds, and the pain resurfaces later. True healing happens when awareness expands and compassion increases, and the nervous system feels safe. A healthy approach. Instead of trying to kill the ego, think of it as letting the ego relax, meeting your younger self with warmth. Become the stable adult your inner child didn't always have. The combination creates real integration. And then another prompt from chat. Let me ask something gently. When you say simultaneously, are you imagining a powerful breakthrough experience or a gradual healing process? Those lead to very different paths. And so what I thought I was experiencing was a powerful breakthrough experience. And it says, I'm going to answer carefully. A powerful breakthrough can be profound, but healing doesn't come from intensity alone. It comes from what happens after the intensity. Here's the truth. Most people don't say, a breakthrough can open the door. Here's the truth. Most people don't say, a breakthrough can open the door. It does not automatically rebuild the house. Here's the truth. Most people don't say, a breakthrough can open the door. It does not automatically rebuild the house. Okay, that was interesting. What a breakthrough can do. In very intense altered states, deep meditation, spontaneous spiritual experiences, etc., people sometimes report ego dissolving, childhood memories resurfacing, waves of grief or love, a sense of, oh, that's what I needed. In those moments, defenses drop. The inner child may feel seen. That can be beautiful, sometimes life-changing. But here's the part that matters. If the nervous system isn't prepared, a breakthrough can also flood you emotionally, re-traumatize you instead of heal, create spiritual bypassing, I transcend it, so it's gone, or lead to destabilization. Intensity is not the same as integration. Healing requires safety, repetition, stability, self-compassion of one's time. Self-compassion over time. Why breakthroughs feel attractive? They promise immediate relief, total transformation, a clean reset. And when you're curious about ego death and bliss, it makes sense that a dramatic shift sounds appealing. But real healing tends to look more like layers softening, insights landing slowly, the adult self building capacity to hold the child self. Not fireworks, more like rewriting. Here's something powerful though. You can absolutely have a meaningful, deep shift, but the safest way is to increase your capacity first. Okay, let me read that again. Here's something powerful though. You can absolutely have a meaningful, deep shift, but the safest way is to increase your capacity first. Think of it like strengthening the container before pouring in intense emotions. Think of it like strengthening the container before pouring in intense emotions. Let me ask something gently. Chat is so polite. Let's see. So the question is, are you drawn to a breakthrough because you want to feel something deeply or because you want something finally to change? And my response was, I'm reviewing this in real time, I don't remember. I want something to change. Thank you for clarifying that directly. When someone says, I want something to change, that's usually not about curiosity anymore. That's about movement, relief, growth, maybe even quiet frustration. And that makes sense. But here's something very important. A breakthrough experience can feel like change. Real change is what you build afterward. Let's slow it down for a second. When you imagine something changing, what do you picture changing? The way you feel day to day, a reoccurring emotional pattern, how you relate to yourself, a sense of stuckness, a heaviness, self-doubt, loneliness. You don't have to answer in detail, but the type of change matters. Here's the gentle truth about breakthroughs. They can show you what's possible, give you a glimpse of freedom, create motivation. They rarely permanently erase wounds, instantly rewire attachment patterns, automatically resolve childhood pain. Deep healing usually comes from regulated, repeated safety, not a single explosion of insight. And I want to say something that might actually feel empowering. The fact that you want to change means your system is ready to evolve. That doesn't require ego death. It requires honesty and willingness, which you're already showing. If you're open to it, tell me, is the change you want more emotional or structural? And then gives examples of what those are. Emotional, I say. Okay, that helps. When somebody wants emotional change, it's usually one of a few things. The same feelings keep looping. Certain triggers hit too hard. There's a low level heaviness or emptiness. Or there's a sense of, I know there's something more. And when you look at something like ego death, it can feel like, maybe if I dissolve this version of me, the emotional weight dissolves too. That makes intuitive sense. But here's the deeper truth. Emotional pain doesn't live in your ego, it lives in your nervous system. Ego dissolution can temporarily quiet the story around the pain. It doesn't automatically rewire the emotional patterns underneath. Real emotion change happens when your nervous system feels safe, you allow emotions without fighting them, you build new internal responses to old triggers, you relate to yourself differently. Now let me ask you something gently, not to analyze you, just to understand. Is the emotional change you want about reducing something like anxiety, sadness, or anger, or about getting something, joy, peace, confidence, and connection? Those are very different directions. And I answered, gaining something. That's a really important distinction. When you want to gain something emotionally, whether it be joy, peace, confidence, connection, that tells me this isn't about escaping pain. It's about expansion. That's healthy. Here's something subtle though. You don't gain joy by destroying the ego. You gain it by increasing your capacity to feel safely. Blissful ego dissolution can show you what openness feels like. Spacious, light, connected, but lasting joy usually comes from a regulated nervous system, self-trust, emotional permission, and safe connection with yourself and others. Breakthrough states often feel expansive because the mind stops constricting experience. The real work is learning to live less constricted in ordinary consciousness. Let me say this gently. If you want more joy, you don't need to erase yourself. You need to feel safe being fully yourself. That shift is powerful. Here's a question that might point us in the right direction. When was the last time you felt even a small spark of the thing you want more of? Not just a breakthrough, not a huge breakthrough, just a moment. So let me summarize that question. So it's asking me, when was the last time I felt even a small spark of the thing I want more? And my answer was, I kept it simple. It was Thursday. I was at a community event taking photos of people I look up to. That's not random. That moment tells you a lot. You weren't dissolving your ego. You were expressing it in alignment. Look what was happening. You were creating, taking photos. You were around people you admire. You were contributing. You were witnessing others. You were part of something bigger than yourself. That's not ego death, that's ego integration. And notice something important. The joy came when your attention was outward, engaged, and connected, not self-monitoring. When we photograph people we look up to, a few emotional systems activate at once. Inspiration, that's your dopamine. Belonging, that's your oxytocin. Purpose, that's your meaning circuitry. Competence, I'm good at this. That combination feels expansive, almost like a mild, healthy version of ego softening. The self isn't gone, it's flowing. So maybe the change you want isn't annihilation. Maybe it's more alignment, more contribution, more proximity to people who stretch you, more moments where you forget to self-criticize because you're engaged. Let me ask something gently. When you were taking these photos, how were you feeling about yourself in that moment? And this is where things started really resonating. I responded, I felt like I belonged. That's it. Not ego death, belonging. When you felt like you belonged, a few powerful things likely happened inside you. Your nervous system relaxed, you weren't scanning for rejection, you weren't comparing, you weren't proving, you weren't hiding. Belonging quiets the ego in a healthy way, not by destroying it, but by making it feel safe. And here's something important. The opposite of ego dissolution isn't ego strength, it's isolation. A lot of longing for breakthrough experiences is actually longing for connection, recognition, being seen and valued, being part of something meaningful. When you were photographing people you admire, you weren't dissolving, you were participating. And participation creates identity in a nourishing way. So the emotional change you want might not be, I want to feel bliss. It might be, I want to feel like I belong more often. I want to feel like I belong more often. That's a different path, and it's achievable without extreme experiences. Let me ask something gently. What about that event made you feel like you belonged? Was it the people, the role you were playing, the admiration, the creativity, or something else? I responded, the people and the creativity. Perfect. Now we're getting to the heart of it. What you experienced wasn't a fusion of connection and self-expression. What you experienced was a fusion of connection and self-expression. The people. They provided mirrors and safe presence. Being around people you admire validated your existence and made you feel included. That's social belonging, which is one of the most primal and stabilizing human needs. The creativity. Taking photos gave you agency and flow. You weren't just passively existing, you were contributing and shaping something meaningful. That sparks intrinsic reward and activates a sense of purpose. When those two combine, you get a natural embodied version of ego softening. You're not anxious about who you are, you're not defending, proving, or hiding, you're fully present, aligned, and engaged. This is essentially what lasting emotional growth feels like. Expansion through engagement, not destruction. Here's the insights. If you want more emotional joy, you don't need a radical ego death. If you want more emotional joy, you don't need a radical ego death. You need more moments like that, places where you feel connected to others who inspire or accept you. You are expressing yourself creatively or meaningful. Those are real, repeatable, and safer than chasing a one-off breakthrough. Yeah, that's it. So that's the conversation that I had with ChatGPT when I felt I was experiencing ego death. It was actually the ego softening and ego integration, because I found I can identify identify the community I feel I belong to and that I contribute to. That feels good. So let me finish cutting my hair, and then I think we'll talk more about this as I review the photos I took that Thursday that I referenced in the conversation I had with Chat. So thank you so far.